Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Happy Sunday morning. Happy Eclipse Eve. Speaking of the eclipse, someone told me that they've opened a restaurant on the moon. Has anyone else heard that? Victor, have you heard that?
Yeah, I've been to that restaurant. It's really good food, but there's no atmosphere.
Good food, but no atmosphere. Okay, so you might not want to go there. I heard there's good parking, but it takes a long way to get there. Well, it won't be long. It won't be long. Okay, the Buddhist sutras that make up what we call the Pali Canon. Pali is the language of the Buddha. Canon mean a set of teachings that comprise the official teachings, if you will, of a particular religious movement. So the Pali Canon contains the basic instructions for those of us who practice Theravada Buddhism, which is our base practice, which is our foundational practice. The meditation we've done and the awareness of the breath, awareness of sensations in the body, awareness of the mind, the four foundations of mindfulness. All of that comes out of the Theravadan tradition, which is the early Buddhist tradition, the original, if you will. And each of these each sutra begins with the words, "Thus have I heard." Now that may sound a little bit strange, because if these are the teachings of the Buddha, why did they begin with the words, "Thus have I heard"? Well, when the Buddha died, all of the senior students got together and said, we need to capture and maintain the teachings of the Master. So what have you heard? Thus have I heard. What have you heard? Thus have I heard. And that's the way the teachings came into being. 100% oral tradition, because I don't know if there even was a written language at that time, in Pali anyway, but the vast, vast majority of individuals did not know how to read or write, if there even was the ability to read or write. The oral tradition maintained primarily through chanting. See, the monks would chant every morning and every evening, and those chants were a way of recalling, remembering, reciting, teaching the teachings of the Buddha, of the Master. So they were maintained that way for 500 years before they were actually put to writing. And they were put to writing on banana leaves. So I don't know how permanent those were. I don't think they were particularly digitally safe or backed up or on the cloud. You had the teachings scratched into basically a papyrus-type paper made from banana skins. So the point I'm making is that there's been great effort in maintaining the teachings of the Buddha through the oral sense. And yet, in the same time, you know what it's like when you pass something on verbally. We've all seen that circle where somebody's told something and you whisper it into everybody's ear, and when it comes back to you, it has no resemblance whatever to what you said. So this maintaining the teaching has been very, very important. Anyway, that's kind of a prelude, because I'd like to begin my talk with these words, "Thus have I totally fabricated." Okay, so that frames what I'm about to say. But there's a method to my madness, so hang in there. I have many hobbies. One of them is that I'm a PR agent in my spare time. Most of my clients are historical characters. And what I do is I go into a deep trance, and I'm able to travel back in time to talk to some of these people and tell them, what a bad rap they're getting in the 21st century. And some of them are concerned, some really don't care. But I've had a number of notable clients, and it's been a great experience to try to change their image in this world, you see. Probably the first and the most difficult that I worked with was Judas Iscariot. Judas supposedly betrayed Jesus. That was a tough one, you see, because people have a mental image of what he is and who he is, you see. I've worked with, another tough one was Genghis Khan, and so he's not, he doesn't have a good image in our culture, so we're working on not changing that, but really giving it more of a whole picture, because he was a nasty character, and yet at the same time he was very brilliant, and he cared very much for his own people, you see. And he brought things to the world that weren't there before him. He was considered, when Time picked a person of the century at the year 1000, the first century, man of the century, or man of the millennium, I should say, was Genghis Khan, because he changed the world, influenced the world, probably more than anybody else has. So Mary Magdalene's another one. Been working with her, and you've probably seen some of the material that's coming out that's kind of showing the other side of Mary Magdalene, that she was not a prostitute, and that she was much more of a important character in the life of Jesus as well. So anyway, I called the Buddha. Now, the Buddha doesn't have a PR problem personally, but the teachings, I think, do. If you've ever read the teachings from a book that's written by a non-Buddhist, like a professor of comparative religions or a history book, or somebody that doesn't understand Buddhism from the inside, from the outside, it looks pretty strange. So when I first read about Buddhism, this was my understanding. First of all, life is suffering. Okay. Secondly, everything dies. Okay. But don't worry about that, because you don't have a self anyway, so you don't exist. But if you meditate and practice for a long time, you may reach nirvana, which means you will become extinct. Okay, all aboard. It sounds rather glum, doesn't it? So that's why I contacted the Buddha and said, we need to do something about this. And he was a very interesting person. When I first contacted him, I addressed him, Your Holiness, And he said, no, don't give me all that stuff. He just called me Sid. So I referred to him as Sid throughout our conversation. Really, really a down-to-earth person, you know. No pretenses, whatever. And so the agreement we came to was we wrote a contract that I could work on updating the teachings to a 21st century vernacular, and that I would not change the basic meaning of the teachings. So I agreed to that as well. So here we are. Here's what I developed, and this is what I've sent to him. And you're the first ones to hear it. And he said he was going to take this proposal and meet with his senior students and get back with me. So I'd like your feedback too. Okay. So first of all, let's start with the opening, that life is dukkha, life is suffering, okay? What if we were to reframe that and say the first noble truth: humans seek satisfaction from a world that is incapable of providing it. Therefore, humans are chronically dissatisfied. What if human beings are seeking satisfaction from a world that cannot give it? Therefore, we are chronically dissatisfied. I kind of liken it to the metaphor of eating popcorn if you're hungry. Popcorn's a great example, right? I mean, most people, I'll speak for myself, but I cannot resist hot, salty popcorn, cheese corn, during a football game, you know. But have you ever really felt satisfied after eating popcorn? If you were hungry? What it does is it gives you the semblance of nourishment, but there's nothing there. You could eat buckets of it and you'd still be hungry. or cotton candy's another example. So we live in a cotton candy world. A world that's filled full of sights and sounds and things to do and sensations and pleasures and all sorts of things we can do. Yum, 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 yum. But here we are. Is this all there is? You say. I think inside of each human being, that's a statement that's being made. Yes, this is nice, and I got this, and this is working fine, and so on and so forth. Am I really, really satisfied deeply? Probably not. You may be, but you're in a definite minority of human beings, you see. And the problem is, because we're not satisfied with the world, we think the problem's with the world. We think the problem's with other people. So we try to fix it. So we try cooking the popcorn differently. And it still doesn't nourish us, no matter how good it tastes. So I'll reiterate that one. Humans seek satisfaction from the world that is incapable of giving it to them. Therefore, we are chronically dissatisfied. So when you hear life is suffering, you might want to reframe it in those words, because it's basically saying the same thing. But I think it's in a way that, to me anyway, would make sense to a 21st century Westerner. Explaining impermanence. You know, we hear about impermanence at memorial services, funerals. Everything dies. Ugh. Impermanence. No matter how good life is, it's going to go away. Well, let's take a look at that. Look at what impermanence really is and maybe frame it in different words. So here's my crack at it, okay? Everything in this world, the conditioned world, is subject to birth, death, and rebirth. Everything. Every sight, every sound, every taste, every smell, every human being, every animal, everything is born, it lives, it dies, and then something else is born. So often we think of impermanence in terms only of loss. But impermanence means that everything is being renewed. It's being lost and being born again. Not in the same form necessarily, but it's part of the cycle. Again, we use the metaphor of waves on the ocean very often. Every wave is born, has a life, and it dies. Every animal in the ocean is born, has a life, and it dies. Every animal, every human being on earth is born, lives, and dies, and is born again in some way. So this cycle of impermanence is a cycle that's very creative. It's not just that the world's falling apart. The world's falling apart, but it's being renewed each moment. Your body's falling apart, but it's being renewed in each moment. So impermanence is simply the dance of life. The creation, the death, and the recreation. So we don't talk much about impermanence when infants are born. But that's part of impermanence too, right? Birth, coming into being. So, everything in this conditioned world is subject to birth, death, and to rebirth. Let's look at no self. That's a tough one, isn't it? Or not tough. Here we go. Any sense of yourself is a construct. It's not real. It's not permanent. What you truly are is greater than you can imagine. So you do not exist as you believe you do. But you do very much exist. And what you are in that existence is beyond human comprehension. So, that has a different vibration to it than there's no self. And this is saying that you do exist in the conditioned world. Whatever, when I say you, I mean whatever you think you are. Whatever I think I am. Whatever I think Robert is. Robert exists in the conditioned world, but Robert has no permanent reality. I do. And you do. But Robert doesn't, and Victor doesn't, Louis doesn't, okay? So that's one, I think, that's both humbling and also at the same time is a way to recognize that it's not all bad news, that there's no self. It's actually good news. Because once again, the self, like everything else, will die, will be recreated, reborn again, will die again. And each time there's a rebirth, there's an opportunity for something new, something novel. So true impermanence is creativity. And that creativity of the universe includes yourself. So the body may not die, but we die oftentimes. Our sense of self is constantly dying and being reborn. So who you are is a dynamic, changing self that exists in this conditioned world that has no reality in the absolute sense, but that reality is who you really are. Okay? In other words, you are the dreamer, you're not the dream. So let's close with saying, let's talk about nirvana. What I would say, does everybody want to reach nirvana? How many people want to become extinct? You know. But nirvana, the mind cannot comprehend reality. It can only be said that you will become that reality when clinging to this world has ceased. That's the way I hear nirvana. The mind, your mind, my mind, cannot comprehend capital R reality. It can only be said that you will become that reality. You will realize that reality when clinging to this world has ceased. So in a sense, you are that reality, but you're lost in the dream. You are the ocean, but you're lost in the wave. I say you, that includes me and everybody else. So finally, I want to put in this disclaimer. My intention is not to reform or revise Buddhism. I want to be clear. I'm not trying to change the teachings, the Dharma. But I am hoping that by giving the Dharma language in the vernacular language in our 21st century understanding, that it may help a little bit in the understanding of the teachings. So that's my intention. And so let's just take a moment and sit for a few seconds. May all beings be free. May all beings know the reality of who they are. Thank you for practicing with us.